Jeff Gailus is the author of a feature piece in the July-August issue of Alberta Views magazine. It's Hidden Harm, and we're about to take a look at his deep dive into methane. He's joining us live this morning from his home in Missoula, Montana, making his Real Talk debut. Jeff, it's nice to see you there.
Nice to see you too, Ryan.
But I wanted to ask you first about what's happening right now, kind of the timeliness of what's happening. You know, we spoke yesterday with Canada's Environment Minister, the federal Environment Minister. Just before he's talking to Alberta's Environment Minister, we've heard the Liberal and Conservative talking points, I guess a cynic might describe them as. What's jumping out at you in the context of what you're paying attention to and seeing in the news cycle right now?
Well, it seems like Premier Moe and Premier Smith have adopted a rhetorical strategy similar to what we experience here in the United States, which is rage farming and creating partisan conflict about a variety of issues. I concur with Mr. Gailus. Seems a bit rich that Moe and Smith are claiming that Gailus wants to shut down the oil sands. He's far from that and is trying to balance the needs of Alberta and Saskatchewan's economic future and our obligations to reduce carbon emissions. And it's especially poignant right now, given that the world is, in many places, is dealing with dangerous levels of excessive heat.
What's the big deal with methane?
Methane is the simplest hydrocarbon, and humans have been using it primarily for heat. The oil and gas industry branded it as natural gas to make it sound benign. I think a better name for it would be methane gas because it's primarily made of methane. It's 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide in the short term. I think the upside is we have an opportunity to curb carbon emissions in the short term by capturing leaked methane, and it shouldn't really cost much because the captured methane can then be sold as is the rest of the natural gas that makes it down to the end of the pipe. So it should be a win-win-win situation for everyone.
Why don't we talk about the technology that's used to monitor methane emissions?
There are companies and governments around the world that were developing this technology to send very small satellites about the size of a shoebox or a microwave oven, I think is the better analogy, into space. And they use sensors to measure methane emissions and plumes in real time. And that gives us a tool to figure out where the emissions are coming from, blows off those leaks so that, the product can be sold and not leaked into the atmosphere.
Let's talk about this story that happened near Lloydminster, a big plume, a big flare-up.
A French company using the European Space Agency's data discovered that, and they were using the fine-scale real-time data, that there was a huge methane leak in Lloydminster on the Saskatchewan border, and they kindly let the Alberta government know, and the Alberta government and the Alberta Energy Regulator had no idea. And the irony is that the Alberta Energy Regulator subscribes to the same data. They chose to get the cheaper version that averages methane emissions out over time, so you don't get these point source leaks, which is a major part of the problem. I mean, there's persistent leaks, of course, which generally are smaller and continuous, but every now and then you get a blowout somewhere, and that's what happened at Lloydminster, and the Alberta government had no idea, nor did industry. I mean, whose responsibility is it? The Alberta Energy Regulator seems to not be doing its job very effectively. One, it depends on what you think their job is. We think that it should be enforcing the rules and regulations and laws to prevent the oil and gas industry or the coal industry or whatever from having undue environmental impacts and also social and health impacts. Before it was the AER, it was something else, but they weren't any better either. The biggest problem is that there's so much discretion in our regulatory system. Take the tailings ponds. Tailings ponds were supposed to have been decreasing in size and being reclaimed over the last 3 decades. None of that's ever happened. There seems to be, some kind of ideological understanding that regulations should not get in the way of maximizing production and profit maximization.
I always love reading someone's writing to them and watching them respond. But you finish your piece in Alberta Views. Methane is both invisible and perilous, you write, which makes it a potent symbol for the inscrutable logic of Alberta's increasingly out-of-touch conservative politicians. Until we free ourselves from leaders that exude such palpable duplicity and incompetence, not a great review, we'll never know with any certainty, you write, whether our government is telling us the truth and looking after our best interests. Someone that's going to be listening to this is going to say, well, what the hell can I do about this?
Go visit your MLA. I mean, the more personal and substantive your communication is, the better it will be received. Give money to groups like the Pembina Institute, or join groups depending on what your proclivity is. And increasingly in Alberta, your vote is very important. For most of my lifetime, we were a one-party state, and we're almost a two-party state. And so that makes your vote even more precious. If you read the polling of Albertans, they overwhelmingly, like by 60 to 80%, want better environmental management, among other things. They recognize that we need to reduce our CO2 emissions. And my worry is that Alberta is going to not be prepared for when oil demand decreases and everything becomes electrified, because we will do something about climate change. Whether we're actually going to meet our goals for 2025, 2035, eventually it's going to get so bad that we're not going to be burning fossil fuels. And if Alberta doesn't position itself in such a way to transition to that new reality, we're going to end up like the United Kingdom after Brexit. This once ruling empire of the globe is a shadow of its former self. It is going through so many economic and social issues because right-wing conservatives duped the people into voting to leave the EU. And it is having calamitous impacts on working class people especially. That's why I do what I do. I care about the future of Alberta.